NSFW. What's the worst thing that's happened at your family gathering? My coolest grandparent had a seizure. I was in late high school at the time and had to take all the little kids upstairs and distract them while everyone else waited for the ambulance, etc. I remember trying to teach them to count to 10 in Japanese because I'd just learned in school and it was the only thing I could think to pass the time. This didn't happen to me, but I watched it happen and it was awful. My cousin was pregnant from a guy who she had only been dating for a few months. But he was a good guy. On Christmas Eve she invited him to our family gathering, and when we were exchanging presents he grabbed a small box from the tree and was 2 seconds from getting down on one knee when that uncle jokingly says, "God, I hope you're not proposing." Everyone laughs and this poor guy is in a half bent knee half standing pose and just looks up at that uncle and slowly powers through it and slowly gets down on one knee and proceeds to ask her if she'll marry him. She said yes and they're engaged, but it was one of the worst 45 seconds of my life. My alcoholic uncle got so drunk at his own daughter's wedding that he pissed on the wedding cake in front of half the wedding party. He quit drinking after that. We had a huge family dinner at a very fancy restaurant. My great aunt decided to move a very fancy pot of flowers with some peacock feathers stuck in it out of the way. In this case, out of the way meant right above the candles. It turns out peacock feathers burn incredibly fast and produce a lot of smoke. The whole restaurant had to be evacuated. To be honest, it wasn't really that bad. The dinner had been incredibly boring. 14-year-old me certainly thought the fire made things more interesting. My stepmom never got along with her sister-in-law, brother's wife. They got into a fist fight one Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house. Grandma got mad and called the police. My dad was a police officer at the time. Guess who showed up to arrest his wife and sister-in-law? Oh, I have one. This happened like a week ago. At a little get-together of family at my house, my brother-in-law and his wife got into a huge argument about their new baby's medical care. The little one had a terrible case of psoriasis, and he blamed his wife for not staying on top of it, causing it to bleed. During this shouting match, Bill declared that if he was going to be raising some other man's baby, he was going to be calling the ducking shots from then on. They have been married for 10 years and have 2 other girls. We were also mortified. We left my house. 10 other people got into cars and went to the park. Quick edit. This was my husband's brother and his wife. Introduced to a distant cousin for the first time who was a 10. She was beautiful, and I was told that she was deaf. I had never met a deaf person. We were both 15 years old. I shook her hand and said to my brother who was standing next to me, "She is a babe." She started to laugh. I read lips. She said, edit, clarification. Aunts, uncles and dads start arguing over my grandfather's possessions after his passing in his house after his funeral. Lots of yelling, pushing. Get the duck outs that day. Eventually pulled my dad out of the house in an effort to save the family. They never recovered. My uncle passed away without ever speaking with my dad again. And the others speak a bit to each other, but we haven't had any family events. It's been 3 years. Christmas at my auntie's house with my whole extended family on my dad's side, and their pets. In particular these 2 dogs, one of which was very fond of the other. And this dog decided he wanted to have his way with the smaller, uninterested dog. Long story short, the large dog came all over the kitchen floor, leaving a huge mess that we had to clean up before eating our dinner. I luckily missed this Christmas cause me and my mom and dad were in Disney. My great grandma had a dog. Can't recall what it was, but it was super small. Since before I was born. Well, one Christmas everyone is eating in the kitchen with a clear view of the dog in the back ears. In the middle of Christmas dinner, a big Doberman came into the backyard and ripped the little dog's throat out. Kind of ruined Christmas. Thanksgiving about 1985. Family gathering at my parents' home. Mom, dad, brother, sister, grandmas, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. All watching football. Cousin picks up the remote to mess with the volume, but turns on the VCR on accident. Full-blown porno fills the screen. Dad leaps, grabs the remote and fumbles frantically to turn it off. Bible thumper brother and sister-in-law snatch up their kids and leave. Cousin says, "Boy, that sudden death can really get intense." Brother brings girl home from Asia. After dinner entire family gets completely wasted. Brother and girlfriend get into huge fight and brother buffs in the bathroom sink. The next morning I walk into my parents' house and they're making breakfast. The first thought on my mind was, thank God it wasn't me this time. My 60-year-old aunt showed me her new boobies and told me she'd take my V card and show me what good pussy feels like. She did this at the dinner table. Our worst family story happened at my aunt's wedding. My aunt, a white lady, was marrying a Korean American man whose parents really wanted him to marry a Korean woman. During their entire engagement, his parents would invite random Korean women over for dinner to try and sway him. Eventually, they seemed to get over the fact that he was definitely going to be marrying a white girl. On the wedding day, his parents seemed politely resigned to the situation. His father actually even danced with my aunt at the reception. So we were all relieved. After dancing, his father approached the mic, and we all expected him to give a toast about how my aunt was so great that he overcame his prejudices or something. Instead, he said, in his thick Korean accent, "This is abomination." Like German Shepherd mating with Poodle, my aunt ran out of the room crying. And my grandfather casually walked up and punched him in the face. In front of 200 wedding guests. People cheered. Was celebrating an uncle's birthday and we realized about 15 minutes into it that grandma died. Everyone lost their mind. Because she was 75 and seemed fine 10 minutes before. Died of massive brain aneurysm. Whole family was devastated. I still took some cake. My grandmother tried to shoot herself in the front yard because my mother wouldn't let me and my siblings, 6, 4 and 2, ride sitting on the back hood of my uncle's classic convertible during their neighborhood 4th of July parade. She was angry that no one would be able to see our outfits if we were seated inside the car, and while trying to shoot herself accidentally grazed my grandpa in the process. Good times. Edit. It's called a trunk. THX guys. Proposed to my girlfriend at my birthday party and she said no, then told me she had been cheating on me. This was post cake. I found out it was a family gathering. You mean I'm related to all these racist hillbillies? My dad got married again when I was 22. I used this excuse to start drinking at 9 AM. Needless to say, at around 1 or 2 the next morning I am so ducked up and ready for bed. I don't remember making it back to my dad's house. I lived in the basement apartment. Apparently after getting home I proceeded to strip off all my clothes and get into my dad and his new wife's bed. Everyone else is still partying until late and finally the happy couple decide they've had enough and want to retire to their bed. Stepmom comes in and finds me passed out, so she figures she'll wake me up by stripping the blankets off me. Boy was she surprised as naked me gets up and belligerently yells at her for waking me up. I then argue that it's my bed and I go to get something to drink in the kitchen. Another 20 of my relatives get the pleasure of taking in my naked ass. With some coaxing they manage to get me in some clothes into my own bed. I wake up 6 hours later with no recollection of the night's events. Edit. I'm a guy. And hooking up with my stepmother would not be an option. Not happening. Not enough booze in the world to make that woman attractive. Edit 2. Wow, my top comment is about my family seeing my D. Stay classy Reddit. I'm kind of late to the thread so this will probably get buried, but at my dad's funeral, his mistress showed up and sat right behind my mom, my brothers, and I. She then began to sing loudly to the music that was playing during the slidder show, followed by her giving a speech about how my dad was her first love, and various bullet. My mom spent a few voluntary days at a mental institution after that. The woman was seen drinking a 40 ounces in the parking lot after the service. Well, one of my aunts found out her husband was cheating on her with a 22-year-old Chinese econ student. He was 63 at the time, so there's that. My brother throwing a temper tantrum at age 30. It has been pretty common for him to blow up about little it all his life. It was his youngest daughter's second birthday and he was in a ratty mood all day even though our mom and his wife had taken care of everything. It came to a head when it was about time to do the cake. It was a kind of tall cake with a carousel on the top. The dog bumped into the table and the cake shifted a little, almost knocking the carousel over. He stood up and said something like, "God damn it. Your ducking dog is ruining everything." My mom said, "Calm down. The cake is fine." He got in her face and said, "Don't tell me what to do, itch." At that point my brother and stepdad got up and kind of surrounded him ready to kick his ass. After a few seconds he finally stormed out of the house and left. I feel the need to reiterate at this point that he was 30 years old and it was his daughter's second birthday. TLDR, my brother's 2-year-old daughter was more mature than my brother. Relatives showing off their weird looking baby and people trying to not say anything awful about it. Being one of the first to greet them. And thus having no warning. All I could come up with was, "Oh, that's a baby." I guess no blood was spilled but I felt like dirt afterwards. My favorite uncle was an early casualty of the AIDS epidemic. He was gay. And out long before it was in any way acceptable. Think small southern town. Late 80s. At his funeral, my grandmother was telling everyone he was a junkie that shared needles. Just to avoid admitting he was gay to her church friends. As if that were a more respectable way to have gotten the virus. Christmas dinner. Grandpa picked up something at the store that wasn't what Grandma asked for. Grandma threw frozen chicken at Grandpa's head. Grandpa ducked. Chicken hit glass patio door, shattering it. Police were called. Children were quickly taken and driven home. And Grandma wonders why most of the family doesn't make much of an effort to stay in touch. When you're watching porn at 2 in the morning, hires a kite at the same time and you're struggling in the upright position, so you start humping the bed, naked. Next thing I know I wake up in the morning, naked against the bed, and whatever the hell I was watching, is likely still on the computer screen.